This is the Voice of Early Childhood podcast. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Voice of Early Childhood podcast. My name is Angelica Slitska. I'm your host. And today I'm joined by Rachel Makepeace. Rachel, thank you very much for joining. It's really great to have you on talking about your area of expertise. So,
hey, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, it's brilliant. So like I said, we're talking about your area of expertise, which is Makaton. So you're a Makaton tutor and SEN teacher, and you're really passionate about this. And it will be really interesting to kind of hear how you got into training, providing training around Makaton. But I guess the first question I'd like to ask, especially for those people who have never heard of what Makaton is, what is Makaton? How would you explain it to, especially to people who've maybe never ever heard of the word at all, or have heard of it but are just really not sure of what it involves?
Okay, yeah, of course. So Makaton is basically a language program that consists of three components. So it consists of speaking, signing, and symbol use as well. Some people choose to use symbols with it, and some people choose not to use symbols, and that is completely okay. But the key with Makaton is you speak when you sign. And the purpose for that really is that Makaton's just there to aid language development right through from babies into adulthood. So it's really good for sort of everyone to be able to use and to really support and aid that understanding that maybe some children don't necessarily have, or if they have things like poor attention and listening, it can really help with those things.
Mm-hmm. So it is very much, like you said, for children who may need, well, firstly, who may need support, may have poor attention, but actually also for anyone really, and to ensure that they're supported with their language, and then to support people in being able to communicate with those who may be struggling to communicate. So I guess basically anyone and everyone would benefit from Makaton.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And the whole thing is that we want to be able to give these children that voice and this way of communicating. And actually, Makaton is able to give them that and give them what they need so that they're able to express their viewpoints. They're able to say like what they like and dislike. And it's really just about giving them that means of communication to make themselves understood.
Mm-hmm. I guess it's also really inclusive as well, isn't it? That's kind of a massive thing around Makaton, that those who may be using Makaton to communicate, they are not on their own and not just kind of singled out, and everyone can also use it. And then you kind of become part, or it becomes like almost part of the culture of the setting, I guess, and just the day-to-day and the norm.
Absolutely. So if you're thinking about just keeping those children that might be like what we know as Makaton users at the centre, it's really thinking about everybody else around them. So what we're trying to do is really support their social interaction in through them using Makaton and their peers and the staff and their parents and carers and just absolutely everybody around them using Makaton. We're providing this really inclusive community. And actually, in addition to all of that, it is just a really fun approach for all children to be able to use and access as well. So actually, like all children are willing to use it.
Mm-hmm. So tell me about, how did you get into what you're doing now? I guess what's been your journey and what is it that your multiple roles involve now?
Yeah, definitely. So I started off as an early years teacher in a mainstream school where sort of Makaton was used a little bit, predominantly just with like singing and story time, kind of your very early language development that you would see across any setting. And then as I transferred into my current role 6 years ago into an SEN school, there was more of a need for Makaton. And actually what I really like is as a tutor, yes, I do train people with Makaton, but actually I see the benefit of it firsthand, and actually seeing those children who might not be able to verbally say what they would like to say, but have that visual means of communication, it really is just life-changing for them. And it really supports their feelings because they're feeling more regulated because they can say what they want to say. And actually, it's all just about giving them a voice in every opportunity that they can have.
Yeah, that's so important, because we often talk about the importance of giving children a voice, but I feel like when we talk about that, we, talk about the importance of giving children the opportunity to express themselves, but don't necessarily think about how that's done. And in circumstances where that might be difficult for children in terms of expressing themselves in the more traditional ways of verbal language. So often we do just naturally, especially if we don't work with children with special needs, tend to almost ignore that there are children who may struggle to communicate, and maybe even they don't have any specific need, but they're still developing their language, but there might be something there. So I guess it's really important to be aware of Makaton and things like this, so that you're able to provide that to support children who may not be, like I said, diagnosed with anything as such, but it's just there to support them and anyone else around them as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you do consider particularly those with SEN, diagnosed or undiagnosed, actually lots of children do have like difficulties with processing and things. And what Makaton is doing is it's giving that means of communication where actually they do have that additional processing time. So if you think about signing, it's giving that visual means, so that extra method of them communicating to be able to really take in and understand what someone's saying to them. And if you bring the symbols into that as well, symbols are something that is permanent. So actually they can look at that and they can really understand it before moving on to what is expected of them. Again, just giving them that additional processing time through the use of Makaton is just fabulous.
So in terms of your work, do you teach children and adults to use it?
So I teach children to use it who need to use it, and then I teach their peers to use it as well. So I teach all children across the school to use it. So the setting, for example, I'm currently in is from age 5 to 19, so they will all use it. We do that in sort of tailored interventions, but we also make it really fun, and we have a choir and we go out and perform. And again, if you think about, these are children with communication needs and SEN, and actually for them to be able to then stand up and perform and sing and sign is huge for them, and it really boosts their self-esteem. But then in addition to that, I do also teach a wide range of adults as well, and these are adults that don't need Makaton themselves, but need it to be able to be a really good communication partner. So it's thinking about education professionals, it's thinking about parents and carers, and then the wider people who don't necessarily have everyday contact with Makaton users. But I work very closely with local hospitals and like CAFs and different settings like that. So like the church and things like that. And actually these are places that our children should have the opportunity to access if they want to. But actually sometimes their communication is that barrier. So it's just about making sure that across the community, there are all these really inclusive opportunities for everybody to access. And through providing adults with the training as well, you're reassuring them that they can be a really good communication partner by you giving them this way of communicating as well.
And I can see in your article you write about Makaton giving children an unaided form of AAC. So in terms of unaided and both AAC, what do you mean by that? Can you just unpick that for people who are not aware of what those terms mean?
Yeah, absolutely. So AAC is alternative and augmentative communication. So alternative communication is where somebody is not able to communicate verbally and they need an alternative method of communicating. Whereas augmentative communication is where they do have some verbal communication, but they just need another form of communication just to be able to assist their communication a little bit more. Now, that is quite a difficult term to sort of come to terms with, and it is broken down further into our unaided and aided communication. Again, this can be quite a complex term, but if you think of unaided as being all of the additional things you can do with your body to support somebody to communicate, and then aided is sort of something separate. So that might be something paper-based or through using electronic devices. But Makaton is a form of unaided AAC. So what that means is the way that you use your body to be able to get a message across to support somebody with communicating. So Makaton is an unaided form of AAC because you're using signs, so you're using your hands and you're using your body language and your facial expression to get that message across to somebody.
Mm-hmm. So it sounds like it's very accessible. You don't need anything but yourself, basically.
Yeah, no, definitely. So as long as you've got yourself, you're absolutely fine.
So how early can children learn Makaton?
Okay, so Makaton can be used from being babies. So if you're thinking about like toddler and baby groups, they can access it through there. So in the same way as you would promote early language development, you would do it through like singing and story time. And then as they progress sort of into school, you can then carry on with it. So again, making it fun, using lots of modelling, lots of games, all those types of things, separate interventions if needed. But again, you'd need some form of training to be able to do that. And then it can just progress through school and, like I say, all the way into adulthood. So just back to your question, there's no set age of being able to learn Makaton. It just depends really on the individual. So some people might be exposed to it from being a baby. However, it might only come to light to some parents and carers sort of as their children have progressed through school a little bit, and maybe their needs have become a bit more prevalent, and they are looking for this form of AAC.
Hello everyone, I'm here with an exciting announcement. The Voice of Early Childhood Conference is back again and it will be held on 8th of February 2025. I'm really excited to share with you all the fantastic speakers and their talks. So first up, we have Matt Baller presenting the morning keynote on proactively supporting children's mental health. Then we have 3 workshops for you to choose from out of a choice of 9 different topics and a variety of speakers. So on the leadership strand, we have Yinka Ognusi, cultivating a critical approach, targeting social justice and anti-racism. We also have Claudia Cicera and Stuart Cloak, recruiting a diverse workforce and investing in staff retention. And we have Wendy Ratcliffe, what to expect on your inspection day. And then we have our practice and parents strand. We have Dr. Sue Allingham speaking on a neuroscientific lens on the learning environment. We also have Stephanie Warrender, early literacy through song drawing. And we have Olivia Corbin-Phillip, using stories to build confidence and improve RSC. We then have our final strand, which is practice focused. From Charmaine Leach, we've got Inclusive Beginnings, Nurturing Every Child with SEND. We have Jan Dubil, Creating Your Own Curriculum. And we have Dr. Mona Saka, Kayla Halls, and Dr. Sarah Benetti on big questions in the baby room. And then last but not least, we have Ben Kingston Hughes presenting our closing keynote all around the essential neuroscience of humour and laughter. So it's a packed agenda with lots of talks to choose from. So make sure that you grab your tickets. The link with full conference info is in this episode description. I'm looking forward to seeing you there. And so when you were saying in terms of babies and young children and kind of introducing Makaton through songs and rhymes and things like that, it reminds me of what a lot of educators, practitioners and parents do with their babies and young children anyway, in terms of all the kind of action rhymes and things like that. But then, as you say, that's separate because with Makaton, it's specific and you've got specific signs that you need to be trained for. It's not just kind of the nursery kind of actions that we kind of have with nursery rhymes, if you know what I'm saying. Is it a lot more complicated, basically?
No, not at all. So, some signs are very much like your gestures, what you would use in
Hmm.
songs and things anyway. And then some are different. But what it is there is a specific sign for every single word. And generally that is split into two sections. So we have what is known as our core vocabulary. So our high frequency words and our words that we use every day. And then our resource vocabulary, which is more topic based as well. But if you use these as from children being babies, if you're using Makaton, it's better for them because can be transferable. So it's not just sort of a random gesture that has been created. Makaton is something that has been made by professionals. And like I say, every sign represents a word, and that word can be then used in all different situations.
And it's good to hear that it's not too complicated to learn as well, because it is something that then, as we said before, it can be quite accessible and something that obviously adults, but then also you say you teach children and their peers as well. So lots of children can pick it up. I don't know if I'm kind of putting you on a spot here, and if you know much about sign language, like British Sign Language, and how like the differences or similarities, and if Makaton is a lot more accessible, but I guess at the same time it's also used for a different purpose too. But is there any kind of similarity there at all?
Yes, a little bit. So the main difference between British Sign Language and Makaton is their purposes. So British Sign Language is there to support those that are deaf, whereas Makaton is there to support those with language development. So Makaton has taken the signs, some of the general signs from British Sign Language, and then has then used them and incorporated them into the Makaton language program. Now, one of the differences between BSL and Makaton is that BSL is known as its language in its own right, whereas Makaton follows the English spoken word order. So Makaton and BSL do not sound the same because they have their different word orders. And
Okay.
also, Makaton focuses on keywords, whereas with British Sign Language, you would then sign every word. So there are quite a few differences in there. But this is a common misconception that I think people make. Because they think like, oh no, we don't need it because our children aren't deaf. Well, actually, that's the purpose of BSL. Makaton is really there to aid that language development, which is why we speak all of the time when we are signing, because we're trying to aid and support that language development. And Makaton really is just aiding the language.
Yeah, I'm really glad that you mentioned that misconception, because I think it is something that people do often think and almost just, I guess, dismiss going to Makaton training or finding out more about it, because they just think it's not not necessary for them. And I was also going to ask about, I guess, your training in the setting that you work in. Do you need to regularly train educators and children? Do you kind of need to have like recap refresher training, or is it more like through the day to day and through being in the class that you support children to pick up more of the Makaton signs?
Okay, yeah, so it just depends really. So in terms of children, obviously we like to model language, don't we? And we need to reinforce that language all of the time. So Makaton is something that is constantly embedded into the classroom. And that's not just in terms of my school, that should be in terms of any educational setting. We're really there to continue modeling it, even if it's words that children necessarily don't know, because again, we are really there to increase the amount of language that they know and are exposed to. Now, with adults, in terms of the training are a one-off sessions. So you've either got your 1 hour taster sessions that you can access online, or you have your 6 hour fully accredited sessions as well, again, which are online to make them more accessible for people. And even though they are sort of one-off training, what is really lovely is actually you would then take it back to your setting, and because you would use it on a daily basis, you're always having that refresher of it because you're embedding it into your practice.
That makes sense. That's really great to have that constant refresher, like you say, instead of like many courses can be, you do the course, you just go away and you almost like forget about it. Whereas here, this is something that does need that regular I guess, usage and refreshing. You can't just do it, forget about it, and then pick it up again. It's something that needs practice, isn't it?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And there are opportunities where you can just book on to sessions to have like a quick refresher if you want to for an hour. There's always that option. So, for example, if you've got a cohort of children where you're like, actually, maybe I haven't been using it that much, or you've had a break from like the summer holidays, there is always that option to then just book onto a quick session, have a bit of a refresher, and then re-embed it straight back into the classroom.
That makes a lot of sense. And in terms of I guess the parents that you work with, so you give training to parents as well, did you say?
Yeah, so I give so out of my role as a teacher, well, in my role as a teacher, and then outside of my role as a teacher, I do deliver sessions to parents all across the country. Again, it might be that they've seen that their children pick up Makaton quite well from like the TV and things, and actually they wanted to get on board with that and use it more with their children day to day. Or it might be that their children have learned it directly with me, and actually they need to continue that means of communication at home as well. So it is quite varied, but actually, if the child needs Makaton and the parents need to communicate with them, then they should be using Makaton as well.
And in terms of the children that maybe don't necessarily need to use Makaton or don't use it very much, how have the parents been? Have they been quite responsive to understanding Makaton and kind of accepting it in your setting, or have any parents also kind of said it's not for us, we don't need to learn it, when you kind of give them the offer of training?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that they are really accepting of it. So I work with a lot of particularly mainstream schools in the local community, and I've got their sort of children on board with it all, and actually their parents are really accepting with it. And I'll put on events where those children have been able to showcase what they have done, and the parents have saying that actually they're wanting to use it at home and things, and they've really on board with it, and the parents have just gone with it because actually it's something they're so enthusiastic about. And they'll say even like in the car, they can see their children they're driving along, their children are wanting to use it all the time. And these are children that are neurotypical children, but actually just have this real love for being able to do it and are putting a lot of time into doing it as well. So I think generally across the board with our SEN and neurotypical children, I think all parents are so accepting of it.
That's really, really nice to hear. And in terms of age ranges as well, so the area that I obviously work in is very much early years, and that's where I've heard more of the term and use of Makaton and seeing it being used. So early years as well as special educational needs. Do you find that though the early years is the main age range, and then obviously special needs children obviously can have, the full age range, but is it mostly the younger children that you find that use Makaton, and are they the kind of the age groups that you're training the parents and adults in, or is it spread across the age groups?
I actually think it's spread across the age groups. I think for those parents and carers and education professionals that haven't got the training, they're always more willing to use it in these early years based settings. And again, I think that's just because of how the curriculum is, and because the curriculum is very much in play, in lots of songs, in nursery rhymes. You use gestures anyway, don't you? So I think what they tried to do is then use Makaton in it. And what I think it is, particularly in mainstream, is that it's easier to approach it in the early years, whereas it's slightly harder to approach it, for example, with neurotypical children as they are sort of older, just because they already have that language. And actually, even if they've got that language, they might not have that full understanding of it, but maybe it's difficult to sort of have that approach to go in with them to initially make it fun. So I worked with a school recently, and they got every single year group from the early years up to year 6 to learn a song using Makaton. And then they showcased it and had a bit of a competition with it. And that was their way of getting Makaton into the curriculum across all age groups. But I think naturally people tend to be more confident using it with your early years age children, just because, like we said at the start, that's something you naturally do anyway.
Yeah, definitely. It's good to hear that there are schools that are really trying to embed it in the whole age range as well, though. That's really nice to hear. So, Rachel, in terms of training, then, I know you mentioned there's the shorter courses and like the longer ones. So, if somebody wants to go on some training around a Makaton, is there much value in doing some shorter training and just getting kind of exposed to the initial, I guess, signs of Makaton and being able to have that understanding, but not really being much of an expert in it?
Yeah, so basically, the sort of what we call our taster sessions are 1.5 hour sessions online, and that's really just to give you a bit of an insight into Makaton. So you'll learn a little bit what it is. You'll have a go at doing some general signs, sign a few sentences, and then be exposed to the symbols a little bit. Whereas your accredited training is the full day training, or can be done over 2 evenings, again online, and that's really just looking at your high frequency functional vocabulary. So, for example, first of all, you'll start looking at somebody's immediate needs and establishing those interactions, and then you sort of develop it more into things like activities, interests, events, all of these types of things. But these longer courses are really having a go at signing and using symbols, but also really understanding all of the theory behind and the theory linked to communication needs as well, and all of the research that has formed Makaton.
Okay, fantastic. So I know that you do provide your own training. So anyone who's listening, they can find out more about Rachel's training on Makaton on the Voice of Early Childhood website on Rachel's article, which is online, ready to read. So thank you very much, Rachel, for telling us all about Makaton and really giving us that introduction. It's really important to have more of awareness, like we said, and hopefully we'll hear from you again as well.
No, thank you so much for having me.